Welcome everyone to this webinar about trends in container shipping, ports and the Panama Canal. I'm Remco de Bruin, the director of Holland House Panama, which is the Dutch Panamanian Chamber of Commerce. We promote trade and investment between the Netherlands and Panama with business support services and networking services. We were set up by the Dutch private sector in Panama, the Dutch Embassy and NL in Business last year by 9 founding members, among which Philips, Boskalis, KLM and Heineken. And we grew already within half a year to 30 members, 32 that we have now. We're part of a worldwide network of business hubs or bilateral chambers of commerce from Asia to Latin America. And well, we decided to, because the maritime sector is very important in Holland with the port of Rotterdam, which is also among the attendees, to organize this webinar together with BritCham and with our other fellow chambers of commerce. I hope you will enjoy the webinar today, and I would like to give the floor to the Vice President of our partners of the British Chamber of Commerce in Panama. John, please go ahead.
Yeah, good morning, everybody, and thank you, Mr. Bruin. Dank u wel for arranging this together with us in the chamber. Personally, I've been involved in the industry, maritime ports and logistics, for about 65 years. So that puts me in the retired list, as you probably work out. I first became involved in the 55, 60 area when I was working for P&O in the Port of London. And I was doing a study with them on the new introduction of containerization. And as part of that study, we came to the conclusion that it wouldn't work. That was the conclusion of the study, that there was nothing to get involved in, basically because of the imbalance in trade. You'd have empty containers going one way, loaded going the other, and the whole thing just wouldn't work. So that was the conclusion of our study, which is quite interesting if you think back in time. However, what we missed, of course, was the productivity, the immense productivity improvements that took place as a result of containerization. As we on the docks in the Port of London were loading probably about 10 tons per hour, containerization, of course, has managed to do about 30 tons in a couple of minutes. So the productivity of containerization and everything associated with the chain is what makes it work. So that's why any disruption to the logistics chain, as has been shown in COVID, incidentally, has a major impact on the whole industry. But enough from me. I would like to again thank you, Mr. Bruin, and I'd like to pass across to our moderator, Patricia Velazquez. I'm sorry if I don't pronounce that name correctly, to take over from me and introduce everybody else. Thank you, Patricia.
Good day to everyone and happy World Maritime Day. Welcome to the Trends in Container Shipping, Ports and the Panama Canal webinar. I would like to thank the British Chamber of Commerce and the House of Holland in Panama for inviting me to be the moderator in today's session. I am pleased to introduce you our panelists. Mrs. Ilya Espino de Marotta, Deputy Administrator of the Panama Canal. Mr. Antonio Dominguez, Maersk Managing Director for the Caribbean Sea Area. Mr. Leo Huisman, APM Head of Terminals for Latin America. Mr. Jared Zerbe, CEO Hutchison Panama Ports Company. So to start, we're going to begin with a short overview presentation, more like a scene setting from Maersk Line. Please, Mr. Antonio.
Thank you very much, Patricia. I hope you guys can see my screen now. So when Patricia and I were talking about this scene setting presentation, I felt like a magician. So Patricia gave me the task of making sure that I make something relevant, that it was actually fun, and that I left you guys with tons of questions in your mind without actually saying anything. So that was quite a challenge. I actually thought about calling my friends in politics and trying to understand how to do that, you know, because I think they're very efficient in doing that. But then she told me you only have 5 minutes. I said, well, politicians is not an auction. So, because it's a short presentation. So what I tried to do today is actually start thinking about why we are here and why it's so relevant. That we have the Panama Canal, we have the ports, and we have Maersk as part of this presentation. So when we look at global trade, 90% of global trade is actually conducted by sea. And then that actually means that we have more than 15 billion tons of cargo moving already by sea. That's more than $20 trillion in commerce. We have more than 70,000 ships already involved. And of those global commerce, 55% move in containers. So getting back to Mr. Meredith's story, I think it's fantastic to see that now 55% actually is moving in containers today. But for us in Latin America, that means 60%. And that's also true for all the emerging countries around the world. When you get to emerging countries, then containerization has been really a tool for opening up and democratizing trade for many nations around the world. And then the Panama Canal actually accounts for 6% of global trade that actually goes through the Panama Canal right now. And I think it's a perfect moment to get all these thoughts around the table because the supply chain is disrupted. And we are talking more and more about resilience and redundancy. Why are we talking about that today? Because I think that we were all surprised by this black swan catastrophic event that really impacted all the supply chains. You know, we were not prepared. That's something that when you talk to all our customers, they will tell you, you know, we didn't have enough resilience, we didn't have enough redundancy. We have all the eggs in one basket. We were sourcing for one single country. We were actually have one single vendor sourcing this or that. We have one single mean of transportation. So it was very, very, I would say disruptive when we start seeing the pandemic moving across the world. And then if the pandemic was not enough, then we have seen actually more and more things impacting the global scenario of trade. We have the trade restrictions, we have the trade wars, we have the border closing, which has been a big impact. We have the planes actually not moving. We have price volatility. We have currency fluctuations in many of our markets in Latin America. And then we also have technological challenges. We have more and more e-commerce being developed. We have many companies that were not ready to actually to be able to jump into what the consumers are demanding. And then we have then the bad guys, a lot of hackers actually trying to profit in these moments and trying to disrupt even more the system. So what we see this black swan that we have seen moving across the entire supply chain globally has actually become more and more complex, not as we initially thought that it was something that was going to be on the first quarter or perhaps moving into the second quarter of the year. Now we see that it's actually going well into the third quarter, and then we see then a second wave of pandemic cases in many countries. And I think it's important to take a look at if there is something that we can learn from trends right now. So we thought that it was interesting to compare perhaps China to United States. So where do we see China today? Where they might be a little bit more advanced right now in getting out of the wave of COVID versus the United States, who's still going through COVID cases. And when we see that, you see that on the chart, the first one, you will see that the dark blue, which is the United States, and China, which is the light blue dot, we don't see that big differences between the two. It seems that the consumer actually have pretty much the same way of acting regardless of where you are in the pandemic. That means that some of these things that actually we have seen on the supply chain are here to stay. We see more and more trends that might become the new normal. For example, this working from home. There's not that big of difference between if you are out of the pandemic or if you are in the middle of the pandemic, you are starting the pandemic. People actually are afraid of coming back to work, and we see more and more actually of people trying to understand what's the new normal for working from the office. The same happens now into consumers. If you look at the graph in number 2 and number 3, we can see the trade down and the trade up. which are the things that consumers actually have been saying, you know, I can live with something of a lower value. I'm not so focused now on quality. Let me go for something which is cheaper. And then things that I see, well, now I need something of higher quality. On the first one, and something that they can actually trade down, you know, all the fashion industry, all the footwear, all that, we see now consumers being able to trade down. While when it goes to fresh and organic foods, vitamins, they are trading up. They want actually quality. They want to make sure that things are properly packaged, that they are getting more and more nutrition when they are home. They want to actually look at their personal care. So all that is trading up. They're asking for higher quality products. So those are some of the trends that we see right now. And we here at Maersk, you know, we are a global company. We're in more than 130 countries around the world. And we see this actually happening everywhere. We don't see a region actually over another in terms of, you know, it's something only happening in Asia, or only happening in Europe, or only happening in Latin America. We see the trends are across all different countries globally. And what we see more and more is that as the pandemic was moving through all the countries, there was a high demand for one single point of contact. They were demanding the customers and the consumers, they want things to be delivered to their houses, or the companies wanted to get help because all their employees were working from home, and they wanted to have one single supplier who was able to actually allow them to move their goods. And I think that was something that was very appropriate, and it was very timely for us as Maersk, because 3 years ago, we decided to move away from being a conglomerate into becoming the global integrator of container logistics. We wanted to make sure that we were all around, that we were able to provide our customers solutions, not only by sea, but also in land. We wanted to make sure that we were able to provide solutions by air. So now at Maersk, we have been able to answer the call of our customers. And if a customer is asking us to put together, you know, air freight, we can do that for them. If a customer is asking us, you know, I don't want a full container of this, I only want a few shoes and you know, a couple of pants and shirts, and we can do LCL for them. So that vision that we unveiled 3 years ago actually is becoming more and more important. And what we see now as a company with 8 consecutive quarters of improvement and excellent results is that this vision that was unveiled is exactly what was needed for the pandemic. So thank you for the opportunity, and I look forward to your question. Back to you, Patricia.
Thank you, Antonio, for this overview. We will start with the panel right away, and at the end we will have some time for the audience to ask some questions. You can place your questions in the chat, or you may raise your hand through the raise hand feature. As you know, ladies first. Mrs. Marotta, what do you see as the most important trends during this COVID period?
During this period and the Panama Canal, we did see some drop in container vessels. We had about 139 less transits. Some of them were just blank sailings, and some of them, we had a liner service that canceled. And we saw this mainly in the month of March till July. Container vessels are coming back up. We did lose about 800,000 TEUs of containers. 70% of that was the US East Coast Asia trade market, and 18% was South America, the West Coast to Europe. So we see that the trend on containers is coming back up. We did see that the cruise liners has been the most impacted segment in the canal. Car carriers also, and they have taken they're taking the longest to recuperate. And we saw some of the natural gas also being impacted. But containers in the last, I have to say that August and September, it's looking much better than in the middle months, but we're still not back to the January, February levels.
Thank you, Ilya. Mr. Leo, about the most important trends emerging in the container shipping and container terminal during this COVID period, what you have to say about that?
Well, I think, especially in Latin America, there is a bit of a catch-up on the port ecosystems becoming digitally advanced. And the crisis has given us an opportunity to fast-track a lot of heavy paper formalities to go digital and paperless. And there is still a lot of work to do in all the ports in Latin America to become equally on the same level as we see in certain other places in the world. I think the other thing which is an emerging trend is that we have to work around travel restrictions. So if you have critical equipment down or you're implementing a system, and usually you have experts flying in from Europe or from the United States, that's not possible. And we all thought this travel restriction will last another month, maybe another month. And now we see pretty much in Latin America that the reality is it's very difficult to get these people in. And when it becomes really important that a supplier is there with the expertise, you have to start working around solutions and using technology, working remote, having different people involved to make sure that it can be done locally. And I think all our suppliers are currently struggling with that challenge because, let's face it, this COVID is going to be at least limiting our travel ability in Latin America for the next, hopefully 3, but possibly 9 to 12 months.
From the point of view of Maersk Line, Mr. Antonio, what are considered the most important trends for container shipping and container terminals during this period?
Yeah, thank you very much, Patricia. I would say that I fully agree with what Leo was saying. We also see a trend towards digitalization, towards getting more technology involved. We see it not only from our customers who are demanding that we're able to give them, real information that they can see where their cargo is. They want to know what is happening with their vendors. They want coordination. So more and more cargo, we are investing heavily in new systems to make sure that we give them that visibility. We have unveiled supply chain specific tools now that the customers can actually see that on real time. They can control their vendors, they can control the whole supply chain. But we also see that actually when it comes to government institution and also with different terminals in Latin America. We have a company who is part of the Maersk Group, which is a joint venture together with IBM called Trade Lanes. And this company is investing heavily on blockchain technology. And even here in Panama, we have been discussing with Panamanian authorities, we have been discussing with terminals in Panama to make sure that we make a very strong ecosystem. If we are able to actually get blockchain and we get all the different players to actually be part of this initiative, we are able to run this business without paper, to make sure that we replace this bill of lading that we have been using for years into an e-bill of lading, to make sure that we improve security. Because once you have blockchain, you're able to make sure that the cargo is only released, you're able to look at the seals only if all the parties on the ecosystems are in agreement. So we see that, we see the authorities ready to jump into that, and we have discussions with that. We see the terminals doing the same. And I'm sure that even the Panama Canal will be willing to look into what we can do with tools like that, blockchain into the Panama Canal. Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Antonio. And Mr. Jarrett, how do you see it from the side of ports? I mean, what are the most important trends during this COVID period?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Okay, first I would say that on a transshipment basis, we've seen overall cargo year to date actually up about over 5%. But local cargo has been down for us more than 30%. So, clearly there's been a little bit of a gain, I think, for Panama ports, terminals over other ports in the region. And part of that is because a lot of the lines, a lot of the customers have looked to use, I think, Panama as a bit of a hub, and also to keep products. And a number of the lines have stopped some of their direct callings that they were doing to some of the countries in the region and consolidated more. So from a transshipment hub perspective, I think Panama has taken advantage a little bit of the situation in terms of becoming even more of a hub, at least in the shorter term. So, and we also, on the non-containerized business, we see a lot of companies looking at trying to keep more products in the region in certain areas because they don't want to have issues in the near future if there's a second wave or something else, as they've had in the past with issues of not having enough inventory. So there's definitely been, we've had a lot of inquiries, and even a number of companies have chosen to use us to store products. Or as Maersk and MSC both have chosen to use different ports in Panama to sort of keep a hub in the region. So I think that that's been one of the main trends. But clearly we also see that, as Leo was mentioning, digitalization and less paper. But in addition to that, in terms of how we deal with our workers and how we deal with people interacting, clearly there's a move to become contactless, meaning that people, when they punch in all these things, they don't want to be touching anything. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons we put in thermal cameras at both of the ports, so that the security guards, for example, don't have to get close to the people when they're coming in. They just, like at the airports, some of the international airports you see, but I think the next step will be facial recognition. And all of this has to be kept in mind in terms of not just dealing with the COVID, but this will change the dynamics in the long term in terms of interaction amongst people. I believe in 2 or 3 years, you'll see almost all the terminals, a lot of the companies stop this idea of using biometrics or cards to punch in. It'll be based on facial recognition.
Thank you, Mr. Jarrett. Mr. Jarrett, Panama is a transshipment center, and you operate in Panama 2 transshipment ports, one in Balboa and another one in Cristobal. Has there been an impact in the transshipment volumes?
Yeah, I mean, clearly our terminal on the Atlantic side in Cristobal has had more than 8% year-to-date increase, whereas our Balboa port, I think, is around 3.5%, close to 4%. So the Cristobal, for us, I mean, I can't really say what's gone for the SSA or the PSA or the Evergreen terminals, but for us, we've seen more of that increase on the Cristobal side, on the Cologne side.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Ilya, in the canal, how has been affected the number of transit of container carriers through the Panama Canal due to the pandemic?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, we had 139 transits less than we had budgeted for this year. We are still at a higher number than fiscal year 2018. I mean, 18, but kind of close to 2019. So containers has been one of the segments that has been impacted, not the highest, like I mentioned before. We have other segments that have been impacted. About most impact has been in the Panamax size vessels. The Neo-Panamax have remained more on budget, let's see, on target, on the amount of we still have 8, 9, 10 Neo-Panamax vessels per day, and most of them are containers. We do get 27% of our container transit through the Neo-Panamax locks, but it's about 70% of 55% of the cargo. So a lot less vessels, but a lot more cargo. We, like I mentioned before, we are anticipating a growth. September doesn't look as good as August, so it looks like it's coming to a stabilization. So we don't know if because of we had the problems with the hurricanes, if you had sailings that were not taking off, and now that's what we see this surge in August, a big time, and now in September is slowing down a little bit, but not to the levels that we had before. So we're pretty confident that next fiscal year will be close to what we were expecting for 2019 at the beginning.
Thank you, Ilya. Mr. Leo, how has the operations of the APM Latin America terminals been affected during this time?
Yeah, as we went through the COVID and all the restrictions, we had to take some drastic action on protecting our people, and that worked well. And actually, the terminals were the safer places to be. But when people go outside the terminal, where it's very strictly arranged, they go back into the communities, and of course, that's where the spread happened, also into our workforce. Regretfully, as we all know, Latin America has been badly hit and still is badly hit. So at times we had to deal in certain countries with up to 15 to 20% of our workforce either being COVID positive or being quarantined because they had been in contact with people who had COVID. And that, of course, you need to change your working schedules, working routines, shift teams. You work with the unions and the authorities to find a solution. Of course, in most of these terminals, it happened at a time that the volumes were down. Jared mentioned that the number for Panama was minus 30%. We have seen the same trend in the second quarter in most Latin American countries, as the imports just disappeared. So thankfully, we have been able to manage the impact of the workforce working through the COVID. The good news is it's on an improving trend in most countries in Latin America. So at least the operational capacity is coming back to where it should be.
Thank you. And for the Maersk line, for the region, Antonio, that you are in charge now, how has the import and export been affected?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So we have seen in Latin America, and that's not something only pertaining to the Caribbean Sea, we see it through all Latin America, is that the imports has been badly affected. I can recognize those numbers that Jared and Leo are mentioning. We see it, that the imports pretty much disappear from most of the countries. But then what we actually notice is that in those countries in Latin America who are heavy into commodities, we see those exports volumes actually growing and growing very, very fast. The amount of cargo moving, especially to China in terms of commodities, they are demanding a lot of grains, they are demanding a lot of protein. Those has been growing. And then I go back to what John was saying at the beginning about, that study, the imbalance that we see today is that we see more and more cargo actually getting out of Latin America and very little coming in. That is creating some issues for lack of equipment in the area. We see a lot of boxes sitting in China that are actually not coming back. And we are lacking actually boxes in this part of the hemisphere. Thank you.
In the point of view of Panama ports, this is for Mr. Jared, how do you see this the post-pandemic scenario in matters of volumes of transshipment cargo?
Okay, I think as we were talking before, local cargo is clearly going to be down for a while. Fortunately, we're making up for things in terms of transshipment cargo. So our own forecast for 2020 over 2019, our total cargo, we're still projecting around 4.5% increase of total cargo, even with local cargo being down so much. Next year, we're looking probably at around a 3% total increase, maybe 3.5%, depending on when the local cargo picks up. If it starts to pick up in the second quarter of next year, which we're actually a bit more, I think, gloomy in terms of when we think the local cargo is going to pick up. But saying that, I think, again, Panama is in a fortunate position relative to other ports that are more gateway ports, reliant on import-export. So we do think that there will continue to be a gain. I think with government policies also trying to encourage Panama to become more of a logistics hub, in the coming years, we see some opportunities to actually see Panama take more market share potentially as there's more regionalization of cargo, more near sourcing, and with the China-US trade issues, we think there'll be more products coming from this region, imported into the US and other places. And Panama, with its central location, has a chance then, I guess, to take advantage of this and to become even a greater transshipment hub than it currently is. So I think these things with regionalization of cargo, China-US trade, means that maybe the growth potentially in 2022, 2023 in the longer term can even be a little bit better than it was prior to the pandemic. But again, it will really depend on a lot of macro and geopolitical factors. But it's a good opportunity for Panama to take advantage, I think, of some of the opportunities in the next 1 or 2 years.
And as for the main challenges that Panama port may have, what do you see?
Clearly, okay, the main challenge that I think any of the companies, not just in the port sector, has here in Panama, to be really blunt and honest, are the high labor costs. The labor costs here are some of the highest in the region, if not the highest. Clearly, from a cost competitive standpoint, on the transshipment business, we're the highest in the region. We have the location, the strategic location. We have a lot of other benefits with quite a good workforce in terms of regional skill sets. We have a lot of expats, management expertise. Productivity, we are slightly more competitive than a lot of countries, but we're not more competitive than all. But with the other countries in the region being able to have lower labor costs and then offer lower transshipment rates, then unless we can maintain the productivity and try to keep a cap on cost growing, this is probably the biggest issue overall that we face. I mean, clearly Caicedo, Jamaica, a number of other ports are really trying to take more market share. They have lower cost base, they have more space, but what they don't have necessarily is the great location. So we have to be careful that we don't lose our advantage. We really have to do something to try to keep costs from growing significantly.
Thank you, Mr. Jared. Ilya, Mrs. Ilya, what are the most affected trade routes during this pandemic? What has been the impact of the pandemic in the volume of TEU that have transited the canal?
U.S. East Coast to Asia has been the most impacted. Definitely, 70% of our 800,000 TEUs that we have lost to put through the canal this year are from that route, and 18% from the East Coast of South America to Europe. So that has been the biggest impact. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Continue.
No, go.
What do you see are the main challenges that the Panama Canal will be facing in matters of challenges and competitiveness?
Challenges, definitely water is our biggest challenge, even though this year it has been, even though we are still below average, has been a good year. We already are, we will be announcing today a 50-foot draft for transiting vessels. So that's a big plus. We were able to accomplish that because we had very important water-saving measures during this dry season. We did the crossfill in the Panamax locks, which allow us to save between 4 to 6 lockages per day. That did impact the shipping a little bit because it would make the transit a little bit slower. But because we had a drop in numbers of vessels, you know, it wasn't such an impact in the transiting time for vessels. So we were able to do that. We are embracing a new project we announced in September 7th for increasing the amount of water in the Panama Canal. So that has been out for request for qualifications. We're expecting companies to put in their proposals by November 12th. So that's a big challenge ahead of us, the water project. It's a $2 billion project that it should be started in somewhere in 2021. Like they mentioned before, the other panelists, we do have a new cost due to all of the measures, the biometric measures we need to take for all of our workers. We did, at the beginning of the pandemic, we did shut down all of the maintenance, all of our dredging projects, and we actually worked with a work base of 4,000 employees. The idea was not to stop shipping, not to stop transit through the canal. So from March 24th until June 8th, we were with half the workforce operating, and then in June 8th, we incorporated, and we saw a strike on increase in the cases of COVID in the canal. We had about 450 altogether to date. Right now, only 75 are active. Everybody else has recouped. And we saw that increase when we brought everybody back to work on June 8th. So none of the contagions came from transiting vessels. It was more from the community bringing the COVID into the workforce, the workspace. So we have over 800 different facilities where we had to implement all of the social distancing partitions, the masks. I mean, it was a big project. So we did that, and like some people say, we had to stop the digital coming into the building. So we had to put the facial So we're making a lot of changes on that. Also, definitely maintenance. We have to reschedule some of our maintenance in the tunnels of the original locks because they're considered confined space and with all this coronavirus. So we're kind of restructuring a little bit some of our maintenance, not to delay it too much, but to see if this pandemic comes to a little bit of a rest. So I would say that, and we're also going through a restructuring, effective October 1st, we have restructured the organization to sort of move forward towards the digitalization of the company in certain areas that we think we are kind of lagging a little bit, so we want to improve that. So that's, we've had a lot of challenges. We implemented working from home for the first time ever. We have about 1,400 people working from home, people that are able to. We are thinking about maybe implementing it full time. We haven't decided that yet, but so far it's working good. So more water, working from home, and digitalization is what we see in the future.
Thank you, Ilya. Mr. Leo, I understand you handle 3 ports in the region, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Colombia. How does this COVID-19 has affected the volumes of cargo?
And I cover a few more ports if you take Peru and Brazil and Argentina. But if you look in general, the Latin America import-export flows in the countries is severely affected. And if you just go back to the latest September OECD GDP forecast, it tells you a chilling account of what's happening in Latin America, because they have worsened the outlook, the GDP outlook in Latin America. But at the same time, they were improving the outlook in the rest of the world, and now even with China still showing a plus 1.8% growth in the economy. So we see that Latin America is disproportionately hit, and we will have to work through the lack of consumer confidence, the lack of employment, the lack of investment in Latin America. So I think on the imports and on the projects and those cargoes, we're going to really struggle in Latin America, and we need some strong leadership from the governments to get Latin America back on the feet. At the same time, we will see the continued strong exports. And I think also the base commodities will start kicking in because the rest of the world sees a better demand. So we just have to work through it, and that will mean for the next 1 to 2 years high volatility in flows moving through our terminals.
What do you see as the main challenges that APM will be having for the region?
Well, I think the main challenges in Latin America is as our customers are increasingly upgrading the size of the vessels, the main challenges remains is that you have to keep pace with the investments in your equipment and the modernization of the equipment. Jared said very clearly is labor component we have in our terminals is still significantly higher than what we, for example, see in other places in the world. So digitization technology moving in is one thing. The other thing is automation is also necessary to move in. And that is going to be a very difficult challenge for Latin America, as we have many ports which needs to go for some significant investment upgrades and modernization of working programs.
Thank you, Mr. Leo. Antonio, as for the main challenges, what are the main challenges for the container shipping by Maersk in the Panama Canal?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, and I think that we can divide it in two, right? So the main challenges for Maersk, and then on our usage of the Panama Canal as well. So for Maersk, as I said before, I think our decision 3 years ago to launch this transformation of our company into being an integrator of container logistics is proving that it was the right decision. The investments that we also did on technology, we just launched a series of new tools, for example, Maersk Flow, that we launched a couple of weeks ago, which allow customers to completely control their supply chain and to be able to coordinate every single aspect of that. That's something that is required. And we had investments actually made ahead of time, and they are coming handy for our customers. So that's a challenge that we see in the industry. How do you are able to present those solutions to the customers now because they're not willing to wait, 6, 7 months. They want it now because they have issues with the supply chain that need to get answers right now. For example, Ilya was talking about the fact that the major trade impacting to the Panama Canal is China to the east coast of the United States. That is correct. But then the one with the highest growth is China to the west coast of the United States. And then you might ask why? That's because people want things yesterday. So they are actually moving everything to the west coast and then using train and then using truck to get those things to the major distribution centers. So that phenomenon that we see is critical. You will get a demand from our customers to be faster, to be able to bring things from more and more locations into one single distribution center. I think that Panama has a unique opportunity on that. We keep talking about our position, and we are blessed with that. But we also need to make sure that we all work together here in Panama to make sure that we complement that position with services. There are plenty of things that we can do here in Panama on top of what we do through the Panama Canal. So with the waiting time to go to the Panama Canal, can we go into what else we can do for those vessels? Can we look into perhaps, can we do something on bunkering? Can we do something on providing services to the vessels? Can we do something to actually touch the cargo while here is in Panama, not that it only goes by? So that will be some of the things that we have seen right now. When it comes to the Panama, I want to congratulate the Panama Canal for this decision to actually look for a solution for the water, which is because it's not only important for the Panama Canal, but also for the country as a whole. And I think we are used here in Panama to see the Panama Canal doing what is right. So congratulations for that.
Thank you.
And how do you see, Antonio, the post-pandemic scenario in matters of volume of import and export of post-pandemic?
Yeah. So what we, early on when we started looking into this, what was the effect, we were very clear that we have different scenarios. And it will depend of, when do you get out of the pandemic? We have, a very pessimistic scenario. We have a very optimistic scenario. And sadly, as Leo was saying, it seems that for Latin America, we get in the pessimistic scenario. Here we are moving into the fourth quarter and we're still not out of the pandemic. We're still having issues to reopen the economies. We still have a lot of issues on the supply chain. We don't see the imports coming back. It's going to be a very different Christmas for many countries in Latin America, this one who is coming. We don't see the volumes coming for Christmas. We don't see any type of cargo that we are used for Christmas actually moving. So when we look at that, I think Latin America has to rethink how do we position ourselves? Is there a role for us to play on this resilience and redundancy? Can we attract these big markets in the area so they look perhaps at Panama for that specific segment, for that specific location where they can actually get additional services? That to me is something that we need to get everyone together in this country and work toward that.
Thank you, Antonio. Mr. Jared, in the case of Panama ports, how do you see the post-pandemic scenario?
From our perspective, sort of in line with what I had said earlier, I think you really won't see overall things, for us at least, getting back up to 2018 levels, or I guess maybe 2019 levels until 2022. In terms of overall business. Clearly, as I mentioned, with the transshipment business, we're not so competitive, at least on the terminal side, as other countries. And so meaning our profitability on the transshipment business isn't very high. Our margins are quite low on the transshipment business. With local cargo being down 30%, Ro-Ro basically stopping, general cargo being way down. And so basically overall, local and non-containerized cargo being so way down, that has had a major impact on our profitability in line with increased costs on COVID. I mean, I think for us, we're looking just on sort of all the different COVID-related things, except overtime, probably at least another 2 million in costs this year. Gels, masks, everything. So for us, it's a little bit of a difficult time in terms of profitability, but in the longer term, we do see more opportunity I think in terms of if we can transition to become more of a hub, that's why we're looking into doing more warehouses inside the port. So our first, I think it's going to be the first really high spec warehouse inside a port in Panama. We're opening next month. And the reason we're doing this is because this is a pilot project for us, because we believe in the long-term opportunity for Panama to become more of a hub. Obviously, people have been trying to get Walmart and some of these other companies to come in for a long time to set up a DC for the region. We're getting a lot of interest, I think, from companies to look at really making Panama more of a hub. Obviously, the Cologne Free Trade Zone has been doing this for a while, but we see with the regionalization and the China-US trade side, again, more of an opportunity in this aspect for Panama. And it's in line with government policy, new policies to try to make Panama a logistics hub for the region. So I guess, sorry, it's a little bit of a long answer to your question, but my main point is, actually in the longer term, we see kind of a bright future if we can take advantage of getting more logistic and more international companies to use Panama as a hub. So it's a good future actually in the longer term, I think, for Panama.
Thank you, Mr. Jarrett. And I have two final questions for all of you. Let's start with you, Mr. Jarrett. What are the learnings that you consider this pandemic have left you, and what changes would you have to do in your business?
Sure. Okay. The only positive overall, and I like to look at things from a positive basis that has come from the virus, is the importance of teamwork. I mean, during the COVID issue, with our top 15 or 20 guys, we had daily calls for months just on the COVID. And we transitioned to a few times a week and then once a week. But it forces a lot more collaboration, and it's required a lot more flexibility. In the longer term, it's going to transition, like I said, I think to, in terms of how we do our practices, a lot more contactless interaction. And even after they get a vaccine, anything, even if this virus basically is under control, I think in the long term, there will be other viruses in the future. And the whole mindset towards how we're doing our work practices, how we're interacting, I think is going to change. Even with open offices, all these things, we're having to put acrylic in between the offices. But I think the technology and the more automation, digitalization, all these things are going to be accelerated in the long term. So, it's interesting. It's interesting on the technology side. So I think the technology side, I guess, will be the biggest change. That will come in a lot more. It'll be more accelerated than it was in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Jarrett. Mrs. Ilya, from the point of view of the Panama Canal, what are the learnings that this pandemic have left you, and what changes would you do?
The learning is that when you are in a difficult situation, you can innovate and you can make things more efficient. I think sometimes when you are in your comfort zone, you tend to just do things routinely and you don't move forward to strive for efficiency. So I think we've learned how to do things better. With the transit of the Sandam and the Rotterdam, we had an amazing experience. We transited vessels. Of course, there were Panamax sizes in a Neo-Panamax locks, but still we had no tugboats attached to the vessels. We had no line handlers on board. Cruise liners, because of they're more maneuverable, we were able to do that. So that's something that we should explore. The amount of people that we need to deploy on board the vessels for transiting, is that necessary? We're looking at lighter ropes for the locomotives instead of cables to try to reduce the crews of people that you need to get on board. All that to facilitate the social distancing and less people. So yes, definitely technology, it's coming in. So we realize that there's some things that could easily be improved as far as efficiency and manpower, and technology definitely is going to dictate a big part of it. So we're looking into that in many areas. Tugboats operations, line handler operation, even we're also implemented, we already have some new floating fenders on the locks that we're going to do a pilot project that will help us protect the vessels and tugboats. So we might implement that. We're looking at 2 different prototypes. We're also looking at doing an approach wall for Agua Clara locks to make more expedited the transit, because it does get a little bit more cumbersome with an approach wall in the Atlantic. So we're looking at different things, but definitely technology, I would say it's one of the core things we're looking at right now.
Thank you. Mr. Leo, from the side of APM terminals, what do you consider will be the learnings?
Well, I think one of the welcome learnings I hope will stick is that we all need to travel a lot less and still get a lot of things done. So I think we all are having the ability to spend more time with our families. The other learning I have is that in this particular crisis especially is that it actually has given a boost to the safety culture in our terminals. Because when you implement all these measures and you work with all your parties, the vessels, the truckers, the authorities, we actually have been able to clean up a lot of practices, and people, of course, in this crisis are sticking to that. And I hope we can stay with that in terms of an improved safety culture in Latin America. So those are 2 of the things which I think will stick. I also hope what will stick is that the cooperation with the authorities is a lot smoother now. It is when you have both the same objective of keeping the supply chains running, then you get a lot of things done. And there's still a lot of patchwork done. So I hope now we can move from patchwork to really good port ecosystems and a different level of collaboration with the authorities. That's what I hope will stick when we move out of this crisis.
Thank you, Mr. Leo. Antonio, from the point of view of Maersk Line, what learnings did you see?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We had actually reflecting on that quite a lot now as we move into 2021. We decided that right from day one that we're going to change all the different rules that we had in the company and operate only based on 3 principles. 3 principles only. They were the things that actually were going to base all our decisions as we went through the pandemic. The first one was to protect our staff. We needed to make sure that we protected every single one who's member of our family. That was number 1. Number 2 is to stay close to our customers. We wanted to make sure that we were there to our customers, understanding their challenges, calling them, making sure that it was anything else that we could do for them. And the third one was being good corporate citizens. Get closer to the government. Let's see what we can actually help in every single country that we are based, and make sure that we are part of the solution in every single country. And we have achieved those 3 here in Panama. You know, we have been working hand in hand with the Panamanian government, making donations and helping as much as we can. We have 95% of our employees working from home. A week before, we actually were asked by the government to do so. So a week before, we sent everybody home. The only ones that actually started, kept working were the ones that we have in the warehouses. We own warehouses here in Panama. We do also have warehouses in Colombia. We have also depots that we own in Costa Rica, in Panama, in Colombia. So all those remain working, but with the highest possible measurements of biosecurity in every single installation. And I'm glad to report that we have very few cases in all those installations and not non-active right now. So we got all those learnings. Something that we are challenging quite a lot is, you know, what's the future of working from home? Because, you know, if we have been able to run this operation for 7 months now with 95% people working from home, you know, it's something that we can do in there. You know, yeah. So we are challenging that perhaps, you know, for my generation, that was quite a moment of reflection, you know. Maybe not for a new generation, but for my generation it was. So that was a learning. And the second one, I would actually say what Leo also mentioned, the level of collaboration that we have achieved, especially here in Panama. You know, we are very grateful to the Panamanian government for their help for seafarers. We still have 30% of our people in our vessels who have not been able to actually go back home since the pandemic started. They have been working well beyond their contracts. And the Panamanian government took a stand on that and helped us, you know, making sure that we are able to change crews in Panama. We will welcome that for every single country around the world, that they actually find inspiration in Panama and allow us to change our crew in Europe, in Asia, everywhere, because they do deserve to go home.
And do you see, Antonio, any other major event that will have a significant impact in your business?
Oh yes, yeah. I think I have been referring to that quite a lot, but our customers have been very clear that they need one single point of contact. They need that company who is able to coordinate, and that doesn't make making investment. It's actually bringing parties together. If we at Maersk are able to have the platforms, and we do, we have very strong platforms, technological platforms to bring together, whatever is needed to move the cargo on land, whatever you need to actually get that cargo into the warehouse, whatever you need to actually clear the cargo, to send it to the distribution center, send to the final customer. We have all that platforms in place, but we can bring all those players together and then make investments for our customers. So that integrator of container logistics vision that we had and we unveiled 3 years ago, actually it shows in our results. We have been able to go through the worst on the pandemic and deliver consecutive quarters. Just on the last quarter, we have a 25% improve in our earnings, despite a 60% drop in volumes. That means that we were able to replace the drop in ocean volumes by that increase on logistics and services. That doesn't mean actually Maersk going in there and taking over. It's actually bringing all these parties together. And I think in Panama, there is a huge place for us to actually play on bringing customers and vendors together.
Thank you, Antonio. Ilya, do you see any other major event that will have a significant impact in the canal?
Besides improving, like I mentioned, technology, and besides our big water project, just adapting to the new way of working. Like Leo mentioned, our workers at the beginning were kind of having a hard time with the new safety measures on the Maersk and the jail. I mean, we had to modify all of our vehicles and put the partitions for transporting pilots, truck crews, line handlers. So it's a new way of doing work. I think it's here to stay. I don't see us relaxing that in the future at all. And it has been a change, a cultural change for the workforce. We, unfortunately, Antonio, we cannot send that much people home. And by the way, I do love working from home. I think it's a quality of life, even though I do work longer hours, I have to say. And my husband sometimes complains that I work longer at home. But you got more flexibility, and you don't have to rush out into the traffic and get dressed up and all that stuff for meetings. I think all of our training, it's being done virtual now. I don't see us traveling as much as we used to do for either training or for business meetings. I mean, this has been fantastic. It has opened up a door on reducing costs on expensive, unnecessary traveling. So I think traveling will be kept for very, very important things. Meetings worked out beautifully with this platform, with Zoom or Teams. There's so many. So I think it's something that we will implement in the canal, do a lot more virtual. And when I think of the efficiency I have under operations, the shipyard is in the Atlantic side, dredging is in Gamboa. All those managers have to come to meetings in the city. No longer that's needed. You can remain in your office and have a meeting. So I think it improves your efficiency on your work when you can do this. And then, of course, just make sure that the workforce is engaged with the safety measures. We implemented a rotation schedule, which is 7 days on and 7 days off to keep people isolated. And even though, we have 6 different unions and you have to deal with unions, we might go to the regular schedule eventually when conditions, we kept that with drivers and line handlers, which is where we have the most cases of coronavirus. We will go back to regular schedule sometime soon. But if they enjoy that 7 days on, 7 days off, it's something that we think it's good for them and for the company. So, but it will be up to the workers to decide if they want to implement that. So some working hours, working schedules that prove to be more efficient for the company and we believe for the employee, we might be willing to implement in the future, but of course that will require some negotiations with the unions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think we're just in time to move on with some audience questions. We have here Stefan Paul. Thank you for doing this seminar. How will the supply chain disruption affect prices on consumer goods? My understanding is that shipping costs are going through the roof as the world economy will go down the circle. Will we see some inflationary pressure at the same time? Would like to answer the question?
I can take it if you want, Patricia.
Okay.
Yeah. So what we see right now on the supply chain globally is that we have a complete reshuffling of patterns. You know, it's not normal to have a shortage of export boxes in Latin America where you have a surplus in the United States and then you have no flows. What we're going through right now is a complete reshuffling of what it was normal and then trying to understand what's the new normal. That brings actually some pressure to the system. We have seen that slowly we see capacity coming back. For example, when we see the trade from China into the United States, we see capacity actually higher than it was last year on the main trades. So that's something that is taken care of. At the end of the day, when we look at supply and demand actually works. Most likely, once we get out of the pandemic and we are able to open the economies and being able to get back to some level of new normalcy, then we'll get the system taking their normal measurements to set the new prices in the market. At the end of the day, there is nothing that the carriers can control in terms of prices. That's completely up to supply and demand. If you have a lot of space in the market, of course, then the prices will go down and vice versa. Thank you, Patricia.
Okay. Thank you, Antonio. Hope this answered, the question was answered. We have here 3 questions related. What is the opinion of the container shipping companies operating within Panama about the bunkering infrastructure available? Do you think that the Atlantic side needs more infrastructure for bunkering operations to make the waiting time to get through the Panama Canal more efficient? Would it be necessary for the shipping container industry to have more options and designated areas for bunkering operations? Who would like to take the question? What is the opinion of the container shipping companies operating within Panama?
You want me to take it? I guess container shipping is only one here, so and the lucky one. I think I mentioned that when I were looking at what else we can do. And of course, if we have vessels waiting out there to go through the Panama Canal, there is a role for the Panamanian country as a whole to play on that. There is something that we can do with bunkering that perhaps has not been explored so far. I'm not an expert on that, but I can actually, when talking to businessmen around and to customers, we can actually see that there is something that we can do in making sure that we have enough infrastructure. Maersk has always been a great promoter of investment in infrastructure. We believe that actually when you have more infrastructure available, that actually has an impact in the price of services. So by all means, if we are able to improve the infrastructure in Panama and offer new bunkering options, that will be a welcome development.
And Patricia, just to add, we are doing 2 anchorage areas in the Atlantic entrance, expanding, and we might be able to do some more bunkering in the Atlantic side once that project is completed, which should be in about a year.
Thank you for answering. And we have 2 more questions. One from Julian Rosales. A keyword for business have changed from scalability to agility. Where do you see the opportunities within the industry to become more agile? Mr. Leo, Mr. Jared, Ilya, who would like to take the question?
Let's try to get a step on that one, if I may, Patricia. I think first of all, in container shipping, you still need scalability to manage your cost because our clients are continuing to use larger tonnage. So that scalability, you need to be able to do it. But for our local importers and exporters, we need to be agile to to adjust the way we work that fits their supply chain needs. And we see more and more clients knocking on our door, and they have specific problems, and it could relate very much in Latin America, to, for example, to security. Doing things in a terminal is much more secure than moving the box outside the terminal into an off-dock area, because you introduced a particular risk. And that agility means we have, as terminals, a role to play for specific clients to find a solution, doing more work inside the terminal. And the last one is we have to start learning these digital tools better. We're just at the start of the digital tools that drives agility. And that, I think, is the big challenge for the port ecosystems, for the terminal operators and the end-to-end logistics operators, which are now emerging.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Leo. We have another and final question, and this is from Armando Gundin. Do you expect the size of container ships to increase in the future, looking at the long term? Has the existing canal expansion reached its maximum capacity? And what kinds of infrastructure does Panama need to implement to anticipate the growth in the future? We have the 3 questions. I don't know if you'd like to start. Maybe Antonio, do you expect the size of container ships to increase in the future?
Well, I cannot speak for the industry. I can speak for Maersk. And Maersk has been very clear that we are not going to be making investment in bigger vessels. We believe that the size of vessels that we have right now are the ones that are needed, and at least in the term future, there will be no investment from the Maersk side.
Okay, as far as the Panama Canal, we do have capacity to increase the amount of transit through the Neo-Panamax locks. Right now, we're averaging between 9 and 10 per day. We can grow to 12 to 13, depending. Without the water-saving basins, of course, we can put 13 most likely, but we can increase to 12 per day. Originally, when we analyzed the project, we thought that the biggest container vessel that would transit the Neo-Panamax locks would carry 12,000 containers. We'd have had vessels carrying over 15,000 containers. So that is a big plus. We in the canal definitely would like to see the biggest containers that can fit the Neo-Panamax transit, because bigger vessels, less water we need to use. So we definitely like to see bigger vessels, but 15,000, it's what has been proven to be fitted in the Neo-Panamax locks. That doesn't mean that they could not design something within the size of the locks, but being able to carry more containers. But we right now can offer a 50-foot draft. Eventually, we could go to 55. The locks were designed to offer a 55-foot draft, which I think will be more for the grain markets or the liquid bulk than containers, but that would require deepening our channels more. So that would be a new investment project that we would have to do if the economies are in there and we would have enough market to offer those additional 5-foot drafts. So we have room to growth for quantity of vessels in the Neo-Panamax locks. We have room to growth in the depth that we would offer for any new market that might develop that might need the additional draft. And of course, because there's been some movement from the Panamax locks to the Neo-Panamax locks, we have capacity to increase numbers of transit in the Panamax locks from the numbers that we are seeing right now, which is about 23, 27 per day. And we have proven before that we could put 40, of course, before the Neo-Panamax locks, but we could increase like 10 a day.
Okay, well, I think the questions has been answered from the audience. Thank you once again, Mrs. Ilya, Mr. Jared, Mr. Antonio, and Mr. Leo for nurturing us with this valuable information and sharing with us in this morning today. We really appreciate it. Well, and now for the final remarks and comments, I would like to pass the mic to Mr. Meredith and Mr. Rempo. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to make a shout out, if I might, for all the seafarers, as has been mentioned by our Maersk friends, who are going through a really difficult time. As chairman of the Mission to Seafarers here in Panama, I really appreciate the work that's been done by the government, the port authorities, and of course by the ports themselves, shipping agents, etc., who have permitted the mission an opportunity to service some of these ships and meet some of the seafarers. They're having a really difficult time, both on the question of being repatriated, which has been mentioned, but also psychologically. They've been locked up on board ship for many, many, many months, and they're going through an incredibly stressful time. So thank you very much for all those who have helped us to get the mission people servicing and getting on board those ships. Thank you. On behalf of the British Chamber, I'd like to thank all those participants and the panel members today for the very enlightening for me, having left the industry a few years back, but a black swan event, it was indeed. And it did show up a lot of weaknesses which are being addressed, and hopefully that can be something that we can bear in mind for the next outbreak, which sure enough is going to happen. But I do think the world's going to be a better place to handle it. And the shipping lines and all the industries associated with the traffic of containers and freight generally are going to be in better shape next time if ultimately it does appear that it's going to happen. And sure enough, I'm told it's going to happen. I'd like to thank all those who actually who contacted and entered into the web today. It's really great to see so many people participating, and especially all those who gave up their time to come onto the panel. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Thanks, John. On behalf of Holland House Panama, I would also want really to thank the panelists here. We had so much experience around the table. I'm really honored to have you here, and I hope we can do a similar event in the future, and maybe in a physical environment when it's possible again. But for the moment, we continue doing it online. If we can help any businesses from Holland or the Curacao, Aruba, the Caribbean, and in Panama with their visibility in Panama, soft landing or contacts, please contact us, and we'll put you in touch with the right people. Also to all the attendees that were watching, thanks all for joining us. I hope you found it useful, that you gained a lot of new knowledge. And if there's anything, just email us. Yeah, that's it. So hope to see you around next time. And you can follow us on social media if you want to keep updated about maritime events and issues. For example, the tender that went out by the Panama Canal, what was it, last week? And these kind of things, we would like to inform you about that. So thanks a lot, and see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Adios.
you. Bye. Thank
Patricia,
you.
Ilya.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Good to see you. Have a great week.
Thank you. Bye.